So in the past two synchronous sessions, we've discussed static life tables as well as the use of effective population size in the computations for life tables. So for today, we'll be moving forward to consulting about the different types of life tables that were discussed in the pre-recorded lectures that we hope you've been able to go through. So just to see who among you have at least tried to watch this and also to give out the first opportunity um, for class participation, my first question for the day is, what's the difference between age-specific and time-specific life tables? I will be entertaining answers from 3 students. Again, what's the difference between age-specific versus time-specific life tables? Sige, let's hear from Jim.
Hello, Miss. Sorry, can I
Hello.
be heard po?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So, a difference between age-specific and time-specific life tables is that, at least in terms of how age-specific life tables are collected, uh, sorry, age-specific life tables are collected by following a population all the way until the entire population dies off, whereas time-specific life tables is taken at a specific time and there are attached assumptions based on this,
Mhm.
such that, for instance, we assume that individuals of a certain uh, life expectancy will have the same life expectancy as individuals in the future. So that's all.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Jim. Margarita, do you have anything to add to Jim's answer?
Um, it's almost the same with what Jim said. So age-specific and time-specific life tables, also known as cohort and static life tables, they mainly differ on how the data is collected, but computation-wise, they're identical. So let's, as like what Jim said, age-specific life tables, you usually follow a cohort until they die, and then time-specific life tables, it's mostly used for long-lived organisms wherein you really can't follow them until they die. So what you do is you assume stationarity, and then you collect data based on a very, very specific time. And associated with this is the assumptions for for that time specific life table.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Margarita. And finally, RC, how do you best differentiate age-specific versus time-specific life tables?
For me, I guess it's very similar to what of my classmates have said previously, in that age specific is compared is age specific follows a group of organisms over time. I'm sorry, the population over time until they're all dead. While for time specific, it just measures the population at one point in time and simply assumes stationarity where the mortality rate would just mortality rate today, the mortality rate in the future would still be the same. And for age specific, they require frequent censuses, while for time specific, they only need data from 1 year.
Okay, thank you so much for that, RC. So to make sure that everybody has a more defined way of differentiating age-specific life tables and time-specific life tables, I've created this table based on your textbook and also the lectures that was provided by Sir Liquanan. So again, age-specific and time-specific life tables are two different approaches used in population ecology to analyze the survival and reproduction of organisms. So when it comes to age-specific life tables, as Margarita has mentioned, these are also called cohort life tables. It tracks a single group of individuals who were born at the same time. So they're called a cohort, and you track them throughout their entire lifespan. So this records survival and reproductive rates at different ages over time. and it provides detailed insights into age-related mortality, but also fecundity. So it works best for species with relatively short lifespans and for populations where tracking individuals over long periods of time is feasible. Yung hindi basta-basta nagdi-disappear, usually for captive organisms. Now, time-specific life tables naman, which are also called static life tables or cross-sectional life tables, they examine the population at a single point in time. And so we sample individuals of different of different ages. So ito yung ginawa natin sa lab. And this is what we've been computing during our first meeting. So we estimate survival rates based on the proportion of individuals at each age class. And again, it functions based on the assumptions that we discussed in our previous meeting. But basically, just to sum it up, it assumes that mortality and birth rates remain constant over time. So this is useful when you have long-lived species or when it's impractical to follow a cohort over time. Okay, so there. Now, the next thing that we need to be familiar with when it comes to population ecology is age-specific fertility. So I'd like to hear from 3 members of the class what age-specific fertility means. Okay, sige, let's start with John.
So, ano po, age-specific fertility is the ability of organisms to reproduce at a particular age group.
Okay, thank you so much for that, John. Cyril, do you have anything to add or elaborate about John's answer?
To add po, it refers to the number of offspring on the given age po.
Okay, the number of offspring that can be produced at a given age. Okay, so age-specific fertility refers to the reproductive output, so yun nga, dami ng offspring, of individuals within a specific age group in a population. So we usually express it as the average number of offspring produced per individual, usually per female, in a given age class over a specific time period. So age-specific fertility is very useful because it helps us determine which age groups contribute most to the population growth. So it's often represented as M sub X, where X is the age class, and M sub X is the average number of offspring produced per female of age X. Now, age-specific fertility is a crucial component of life tables and is used in calculating a specific population growth metric called net reproductive rate, or R sub 0. But you can also use it to compute for intrinsic rate of increase, which is small letter r. Now, in human demographics, it's often expressed as the age-specific fertility rate, or ASFR, per 1,000 women in a given age range. But for now, we will be focusing on learning how to compute for the fecundity schedule. So let me just stop share and open another, what do you call this? Another window so we can do our computations. Oops. Fecundity schedule. Let me just open the Excel sheet. Okay, so compared to the computations related to, what do you call this? The static life tables, the computations for fecundity schedule is a little bit more straightforward. Let me just zoom this in a little bit. Okay, there you go. So, text. Okay, so as I've mentioned earlier, when computing for fecundity schedule, we get to determine net reproductive rate, which allows us to learn more whether a population is expanding or contracting. So again, for the opportunity to get class participation, given the information shown on screen, I'll give you a few minutes to do this. Can you determine the net reproductive rate of this population. So if, for example, at 0 to 1, the L sub x is 1, age-specific fertility is 0. For age 1 to 2, survivorship is 0.75, and age-specific fertility is 0. For 2 to 3, its survivorship is 0.58, and M sub x is 0.14. For 3 to 4, survivorship is 0.58, and age-specific fertility is 0.57. For 4 to 5, it's 0.5 and 0.5. For 5 to 6, it's 0.42 and 0. For 6 to 7, it's 0.33 and 1.25. For 7 to 8, it's 0.25 and 0.67. For 8 to 9, it's 0.25 and 0.33. For 9 to 10, it's 0.17 to 0 and 0. And for 10 to 11, it's 0.08 and 0. So the first three to raise their hands, please tell us what the net reproductive rate is for this population. Okay, Charmiel, go ahead.
Miss, the net reproductive rate for this population is 1.33 po.
Okay, 1.33. Juliana, do you have the same answer?
Same answer po, 1.36.
Rachel, do you agree or disagree?
Agree din po, 1.32 po.
Okay, let's see if your classmates are right. So if we look, ako ulit i-zoom in. Okay, so if we look at the answer key for this one, so all you need to do is to multiply column B with column C. So if you look at the formula for column D, it's B4 times C4. So 1 times 0 is 0. 0.75 times 0 is 0. 0.58 times 0.14 is around 0.08. 0.58 times 0.57 is around 0.33. 0.5 times 0.5 is about 0.25. 0.42 times 0 is 0. 0.33 times 1.25 is 0.41. 0.25 times 0.67 is 0.17. 0.25 times 0.33 is 0.08. 0.17 times 0 is 0. 0.08 times 0 is 0. And then, if you look at the formula, you just sum up everything. It's about 1.32. So that's the net reproductive rate for this population. So let's see if more of your classmates were able to get how this computation is done. Let's look at another population. So for this population, we still have age class 0 to 1. Their L sub x is 1, and their fecundity is 0. For age class 1 to 2, their survivorship is 0.98. Their age-specific fertility is 0. For 2 to 3 years old, survivorship is 0.96. Age-specific fertility is 0. For age class 3 to 4, survivorship is 0.93 and fertility is 0. For age 4 to 5, survivorship is 0.9, but age-specific fertility is 1. For age class 5 to 6, survivorship is 0.85 and age-specific fertility is 2. For 6 to 7, survivorship is 0.78. Age-specific fertility is 2.5. For 7 to 8, survivorship is 0.65 and age-specific fertility is 2. For 8 to 9, survivorship is 0.5 and age-specific fertility is 1.5. For 9 to 10, survivorship is 0.3 and age-specific fertility is 0.5. And finally, for age 10 to 11, survivorship is 0.1 and age-specific fertility is 0. So let's hear from 3 members of the class. You can have a few minutes, but the first 3 to raise their hands will be allowed to recite about what the net reproductive rate is for this population. Sige, Carlo, let's hear from you.
6.75.
Okay, Carlo says it's 6.75. Joel, do you agree?
Yes po, same with Carlos, 6.75.
And RC, do you confirm or deny the answer?
Based on the answers of Carla and Joel, I confirm.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's see if their computations are correct. So for fecundity schedule of the second population, so again, just to make sure everybody's getting the computations correctly, it's straightforward. 1 times 0 is 0. Okay. 0.98 times 0 is 0. 0.96 times 0 is 0. 0.93 times 0 is 0. 0.91 times 1 is 0.9. 0.9 times 1 is 0.9. 0.85 times 2 is 1.7. 0.78 times 2.5 is 1.95. 0.65 times 2 is 1.3. 0.5 times 1.5 is 0.75. 0.3 times 0.5 is 0.15. And 0.1 times 0 is 0. For a total, again, for a total net reproductive rate, again, it's the summation of everything on top of 6.75. So right now, I have the benefit of having an Excel sheet. In the long exam and in your quizzes, you'll have to do it manually using a scientific calculator. So practicing doing the computations on your own would be very useful so that you can develop your speed, because there are ways for us to make this complicated. For example, right now, survivorship is given. What if instead of survivorship, I give the death rate? Or instead of death rate, I give the number of individuals, or N sub X per age class. So you have to derive survivorship before you can then compute for net reproductive rate. So it's possible for that to happen. So as much as possible, try to practice your computation so you can be faster, a little bit faster, and a little bit more confident with it. But let's have one more practice for today. Ayoko namang mabigla kayo sobra, so ganito muna tayo for today. So for this particular population, for age class 0 to 1, our survivorship is 1 and fertility is 0. For age class 1 to 2, our survivorship is 0.8 and age-specific fertility is 0. For age class 2 to 3, our survivorship is 0.64 and age-specific fertility is 0.5. For 3 to 4, survivorship is 0.51 and age-specific fertility is 1. For age 4 to 5, survivorship is 0.41 and age-specific fertility is 2. For age class 5 to 6, survivorship is 0.33 and age-specific fertility is 2.5. For age 6 to 7, survivorship is 0.26 and age-specific fertility is 2. For age 7 to 8, survivorship is 0.21, age-specific fertility is 1.5. For age class 8 to 9, survivorship is 0.17 and age-specific fertility is 1. For age class 9 to 10, survivorship is 0.13 and age-specific fertility is 0.5. And for age class 10 to 11, survivorship is 0.1 and age-specific fertility is 0. I can see that more people are now ready. So John, go ahead.
The net reproductive rate po for this particular group of organisms would be 3.545 po.
Okay, thank you for that. See, Kyle, do you agree or disagree with John?
I agree po with John. 3.54.
Okay, and Cyril, how about you? Do you agree or disagree with your classmates?
Agree po. 3.545 po.
Okay, let's see if they're correct. So again, you do a straight up multiplication and then addition. So 1 times 0 is 0. 0.8 times 0 is 0. 0.64 times 0.5 is 0.32. 0.51 times 1 is 0.51. 0.41 times 2 is 0.82. 0.33 times 2.5 is 0.825. 0.26 times 2 is 0.52. 0.21 times 1.5 is 0.315. 0.17 times 1 is 0.17. 0.13 times 0.5 is 0.065, and 0.1 times 0 is 0. And if you add them all up, you will get 3.545. Okay, so good. I hope that you can remember that very straightforward computation. But let's go back to our discussion for today and how fecundity schedules can affect life tables. So now that you know how to compute for net reproductive rate, my next question for 3 people in class is, if you get a net reproductive rate of 1.32, what does it mean for that population? So ano ang implications niya? Sharmil, go ahead.
This means po that the population is growing po since it's greater than 1.
Okay, so the population is growing because your net reproductive rate is greater than 1. Maxime, do you agree? And do you have anything to add?
I agree po, Miss, na it means the population is growing. Also, if I remember correctly, in the lecture, it meant parang that means that species will reproduce 1.32 offspring po, something like that.
Okay, thank you. And Sophia, anything to add, and whether you agree or disagree with your classmates?
I agree po with their answer, and it was mentioned din po during the lecture na over the course of its lifespan, the offspring would the number of offspring that the individual would give off is 1.32.
Okay, sige. Thank you so much for that. So again, just to reiterate what your classmates have mentioned, a net reproductive rate of 1.32 means that on average, each individual, again, typically a female in the population, is expected to produce 1.32 surviving offspring over its lifetime. So ang ibig sabihin nito, hindi necessarily 1.32 lang yung naipapanganak. Kumbaga 1.32 yung average na napapanganak at nabubuhay. Okay, so it's not just about giving birth, it's also about ensuring that the organisms that were born into the world also survived. Okay, so again, since the net reproductive rate is greater than 1, this means the population is increasing over time. So it's growing at a slow but steady rate. Now, if conditions remain constant, let's say food availability remains the same, habitat quality is the same, survival rates of offspring and adults remain the same, the population will expand rather than decline or stay stable. However, another thing for you to note is that 1.32, that rate of growth is not exponential. It's actually moderate compared to higher net reproductive rate values. Okay, so yun. Now, for my next question, another thing that you might have heard in the lecture is that fecundity schedules are only computed for females. So why is this the case? Why do we only compute for fecundity schedules for females? Margarita, go ahead.
Actually, I have a question po about the previous slide.
Okay, no problem.
It was mentioned po in the lecture. I'm not sure if Toklikwanan was just mistaken po with the number, but he said this na the 1.33 net reproductive rate also means that the population of lions increases their number for about 33% for every generation, roughly about 3 years. I just like to clarify the statement po. I didn't get the 33% every generation and the roughly about 3 years that he mentioned po.
So the 33% comes from the fact that the net reproductive rate is 1.32. So pag 1 kasi, ibig sabihin, nag-expand kayo, well, hindi ka nag-expand, you stayed the same. Yung 33% comes from the 0.32 that comes in the value. So when we say 0.32, it means that for every year, merong nadadagdag na 0.32 na lion. Now, I know it's hard to imagine, uy, 1/3 ng lion, so puwet lang ba yun tsaka legs? But it basically says that for every year, on average, may 1/3 na lion na nadadagdag. So after 3 years, so 0.32 plus 0.32 plus 0.33, nakabuo na tayo ng isang lion. So lumaki tayo ng 33% for 3 years. Nadagdagan tayo ng 1/3. Does that help, Margarita?
Yes, good talk. So the 3 years means na nakabuo ka na ng isang lion with the 33% that you have.
Yes. So yung kunyari 1.25 naman siya, mag-grow siya by 25% in 4 years.
Okay po. Yes, thank you, Doc.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so going back to our question earlier, why is the fecundity schedule only computed for females? Rachel, go ahead.
Based on my understanding po, most life tables are typically computed for females only because for higher animals, the females limit the population growth. So sperms and the fathers are not limiting, but the eggs and the mothers are.
Okay, so females are limiting, not the sperm or the father. John, do you have anything to ask or add?
I agree with her answer po. I would just like to add that the reason why the females are limiting po is that sperms can be manufactured throughout life and parang more or less unlimited po siya. Yung egg po is that it is only produced, like there are only unlimited number of eggs produced during, like, kapag embryo yung female, like you have 1,000 eggs, you will have 1,000 eggs until you die. And it will only be monthly. So yeah, and I also agree with her that it only occurs in higher organisms. And in connection to that po, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you compute po that same table for kunya mga lower organisms like invertebrates? Yung mga capable of asexual reproduction po.
Sorry, asexual reproduction?
Opo. More to be more specific po, yung mga capable of for asexual reproduction po.
Okay. So in this case, you have to track the reproductive output of individuals pa rin at various ages or life stages. So the process is similar to calculating fecundity in sexual species, but simplified, there would be no differentiation between male and female contributions. So yung fecundity schedule nila ay hindi na lang specific sa kababaihan. Instead, we treat males and females the same way since kaya nilang mag-reproduce asexually. So, yun. Parang instead of just looking at the output of the females, we look at how many offspring, whether through sexual or asexual reproduction, ang ginagawa ng both sides. Does that help, John?
Yes po, ma'am. Thank you po.
Okay. So, one more answer for this question. Juliana, do you agree with your two previous classmates?
Yes, but I agree po sa limiting factor yung females because they directly produce offspring. And then, in contrast, a single male can fertilize multiple females, kaya hindi po sila yung limiting factor sa reproduction.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Juliana. So again, just to reiterate, for higher organisms that are only capable of sexual reproduction, the fecundity schedule is typically computed only for females because in most species, females are the limiting factor in population growth. Kasi in sexually reproducing species, the number of offspring born depends on the number of reproductive females, not males. Kasi even if males contribute genetically, their presence alone does not limit reproduction in the same way that female fertility does. Now, please note that many species exhibit polygyny, which is one male mates with multiple females, meaning that a few males can fertilize many females, making male numbers less relevant in predicting population growth. And then, even in monogamous species, population growth is still determined primarily by female survival and reproduction rates because, as mentioned by your classmates, it's the female that carries the offspring throughout the gestation period. It's the female eggs that set the limiting number in terms of the offspring that are born, because only a limited number of eggs are produced by females, whereas sperm are almost always in constant production. Okay, so therefore, when it comes to fecundity schedule of higher organisms, only the schedule of females become the limiting factor. However, when it comes to organisms that are capable of asexual reproduction, we track the fecundity schedule of both males and females. Okay. Margarita, go ahead.
I just have another question related to the recording po. I'm not sure if Doc Lequanon was mistaken lang din po when he said na the 1.33 refers to only the female offspring. Is that right? Na it's only the female offspring or just offspring in general po?
It actually only refers to the female offspring, because when tracking reproductive contribution, we recognize that only females produce offspring. So tracking female offspring gives a clearer measure of future reproductive potential. So by focusing on female offspring, the model avoids double counting individuals kasi nga males don't contribute to offspring numbers. So if each female produces 1.33 daughters, this means the population is increasing by 33% per generation under ideal conditions. But if we have species that reproduce asexually, or where all individuals can produce offspring, the R sub zero may reflect total offspring rather than just females. So does that help, Margarita?
Yes, but Doc. So just another follow-up question. So the way that fecundity schedule is different from the static and cohort life table. Yung static and cohort life table po, they're both female and males. But for fecundity, it's only females.
They function differently. Because for static and cohort life tables, our ultimate goal is to track life expectancies, which is how long you have left to live. For fecundity schedules, we want to determine how many offspring are produced per generation. So in a way, it helps us predict if a population is expanding or declining over time. So they have different functions. So it's not
Okay
just
po.
male or female, it's about tracking a different objective.
Okay po, Doc. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so let's apply the theory on fecundity schedule to data. So let's say we have this fecundity schedule. Which age class should we be most concerned about for conservation? So let's say this species represents a species that is endangered. Anong age class yung dapat nating pagfokusan ng ating resources? Paul, go ahead.
Yung 6 to 7 po because it has the highest number of 0.41. So since this represents na siya yung nagko-contribute mostly ng net reproductive rate, we would want to conserve this because dito po siya pinaka-reproductively active.
Okay. Sharmil, do you agree or disagree?
I agree po with Paul. And I also want to add na parang if yung 0.41 sinubtract mo from 1.32, it will be less than 1. So, ayun po. Mag-change na yung net reproductive rate niya and possible na mag-shrink na yung population.
Okay. Maxime, do you agree or disagree?
Similar lang po with Paul and with the previous answers. Because for the ages 6 to 7, they contribute the most to the net reproductive rate. And yun nga po, if they were to all of them were to die, then the net reproductive rate would be below 1, and thus the population would be declining po.
Okay. So, okay, from the answers of your classmates, they're correct. So we should be most concerned about 6 to 7 year age class for conservation. So you will notice that they have the highest contribution to net reproductive rate. So if you multiply 0.33 with 1.25, you get 0.41. And these represent the most reproductively active individuals in the population. And you will also notice that by 7 to 8 years old, survivorship drops to 0.25. So this indicates that many individuals do not survive long enough to maximize their reproductive output. So protecting individuals in the age 6 to 7 years is critical because they contribute the most to population growth. So if these age groups experience high mortality, let's say due to overharvesting o kaya habitat loss, whatever kind of environmental stress, so population growth may decline. Okay? So conservation efforts should reduce mortality before and during peak reproductive years to ensure individuals reach reproductive maturity and contribute to the next generation. John, you have a question?
I would just like to clarify, ma'am, yung number, yung from yung 6 to 7 age cohort until 7 to 8 age cohort po. Yung how would you say po na sharp yung drop in survivorship po? Like what's the threshold po? Like the difference po?
Well, hindi naman siya sharp versus, wala siyang threshold. But you'll notice na 6 to 7 became a focus of our attention kasi siya yung may pinakamataas na contribution to net reproductive rate. And then, point of concern yung fact na sa susunod na age group, bumaba na yung survivorship even though relatively mataas pa rin yung fertility. So it means that slowly, actually, starting 5 to 6 pa lang, bumababa na yung survivorship. Pero yun nga, ang peak ng reproduction is 6 to 7. So, we have to worry about the fact that the moment they start reaching peak reproduction, nagsa-start ng mag-die off yung population natin. So, does that help, John?
Thank you po. Yes po, ma'am.
Okay. So yun, no? So sadly, there are a lot of organisms na ganito. By the time na ready na silang mag-reproduce, dumadami na rin sa kanila yung nagda-die off. So yun yung kailangan nating bantayan, especially if the organisms need conservation. Okay. But let's change our perspective. We have the same age, we have the same fecundity schedule, but this time, they're pests. So let's say they're cockroaches or yung kukulisap na pumapatay ng coconut trees. So if we are pest eradicators, what age class should we target if this species was a pest? RC, go ahead.
I guess with the same wisdom, yeah, we should also be targeting those in the ages of 6 to 7, especially because the of course the main goal of pest eradicators is to eradicate the population of pests, and the one way to ensure that that will last long term is to eradicate those who are most reproductively capable of I guess continuing their number.
Okay, thank you for that, RC. Raze, do you agree or disagree?
I agree with RC po, miss. Similarly rin po na with conservation, you would keep the age group um with the most fecundity. You'd also focus on that group para ma-control yung population po. So same po na yung age groups na 6 to 7 would be the ones we would target if the species was a pest po.
Okay, last opinion on this question. Herschel, let's hear from you.
Similar answer lang po as them na yung 6 to 7 po yung dapat focusan po if we were trying to eradicate this species. Since if yung net reproductive rate po natin is 1.32 and we eradicate po yung 6 to 7 with value of 0.41, yung magiging net reproductive rate po would be below 1 po, leading to the shrinkage po ng species na in population.
Okay, thank you for that, Herschel. So just to reiterate to everybody the answers of your classmates, if this species were a pest, the most effective age class to target for control would still be the 6 to 7 year age class. So again, it's because it has the highest reproductive contribution. It produces the most offspring per surviving individual. So this means that if we remove these individuals, then it would reduce the population's ability to grow the most. Now, we targeting peak reproduction is key because it means they won't contribute significantly to the next generation. So the next most effective age class to target would be 5 to 6. Even though wala pa silang fertility, ipaprevent na natin na maging fertile sila. So 5 to 6 and 6 to 7 would be the best. Kasi even though 5 to 6, hindi pa sila masyadong nagre-reproduce, the fact na in a year, magmamature na sila, that could become a problem. So peak reproductive age plus those just slightly below it would be the most effective. Okay? So some of the ways to do pest control could be to introduce predators or parasites to target individuals before they become highly reproductive. We can also disrupt breeding conditions to prevent individuals from reaching reproductive age, or we can use chemical or physical control and then focus on age groups just before or during peak reproduction to maximize impact on population growth. Okay. Now, before we start the quiz in a few minutes, so again, we'll be having your first quiz for population ecology by 8:45. I would like to highlight survivorship curves, which are graphical representation of the number of individuals surviving at each age in a population over time. So survivorship curves helps illustrate mortality patterns and how survival rates change across different life stages. So I think John asked a question about this during our first meeting, and I told him that for at least the first meeting, it was just an illustration because we will have a separate schedule to discuss it. So today is the day. So there are three main types of survivorships. So type 1, as you can see on top, is a convex curve. It represents populations with high juvenile survival and late life mortality. So for these kinds of species, most individuals survive to old age, with mortality increasing sharply in later life. So examples of this would be humans, elephants, large mammals. And when it comes to conservation, populations of these survivorship curve type are most affected by adult mortality. So habitat destruction, hunting of adults, things like that. Now for type 2, it's a linear curve. So it's not a curve, it's a line. But yeah, it's called a linear curve regardless. Represents populations with constant mortality rates. So here, the probability of dying is constant throughout life, meaning throughout all age groups, there is an equal chance of death, no, at any age. So example species are most birds, some reptiles, and small mammals. And the conservation implications of this is that the populations with the type 2 survivorship curve would decline steadily. So conservation should focus on reducing mortality across all life stages. And then finally, we have our type 3 or concave curve. It's high juvenile mortality and few survivors to adulthood. So in this case, in these populations, most individuals die early in life, but those that survive past a critical stage live much longer. So this is true for fish, for amphibians, for mangrove crabs, for oysters, and plants. So in terms of conservation of these organisms, we have to protect the juveniles. So let's say we can create nursery habitats. We can do a catch and release practice. For example, that's what we're doing for some endangered species where we keep the young in a controlled environment and then release them to the environment, to the natural ecosystem when they're already older. So this can help with population recovery. But related to these survivorship curves would be whether they are R-selected or K-selected. So R-selected species, so this one, usually have type 3 survivorship curves. So these have high reproductive rates but low parental investment. So this means for these species, they produce many offspring but few survive to adulthood. So lagi silang nagpapakita ng high juvenile mortality due to, let's say, predation, the abiotic environmental factors, or just the fact that the parents don't care about their offspring, no, the lack of parental care. So the survivorship of most R-selected organisms are type 3, which is a concave curve, as I've mentioned earlier. So there is a steep drop in early life stages, but it levels off for those that survive. Now, for K-selected species, on the other hand, these have low reproductive rates, but high parental investment. So this means they produce fewer offspring, but most survive to adulthood due to parental care and stable environments. So this means for K-selected species, they experience low juvenile mortality with deaths occurring mostly in old age. So ang usual na kapartner niya na survivorship curve, which is type 1, is type 1 na convex. So this indicates a high survival rate in early and middle life, but a sharp decline in old age. However, you will also notice from the recording that the type 2 survivorship um, is more of an intermediate. It's halfway between K and R selected, but it still falls more on the K selected side. Okay? So some species, like birds and reptiles, that show a type 2 survivorship don't fit neatly into the R versus K selected frameworks, but they lean towards K selected frameworks because they usually don't produce too many offspring. And there is still a little bit of parental care. Okay, so yon. Now, let's connect the survivorship curves with the fecundity schedule. So let's say, given this fecundity schedule on the screen, which survivorship curve does it fit more? Type 1, type 2, or type 3? Again, given the fecundity schedule on the screen, which survivorship curve, type 1, type 2, or type 3, does it fit more? Let's hear from John.
Based on what I can deduce from this, uh, let's say table po, I think this is a type 2 po, type 2 survivorship curve because it is, as you can see po, parang constant po yung rate of decrease in survivorship. And also, pagdating sa middle age, mga 4 to 5 or 5 to 6 po years old, mga 0.50 na lang po yung survivorship.
Okay. Carlo, do you agree or disagree?
I think I would disagree. Parang both. However, I believe na it would be a lot closer to type 1. Kasi
Mhm.
towards the end, parang bigla po siyang tumatalon. Like for example, from between 6 to 7, 7 to 8, from 0.33 naging 0.25, which is basically minus 0.08. And then
Mhm.
from 25 to 17, parang same din po yung increment na bumawas. And then from 9 to 10 and 10 to 11, yung nawala po is like 0.09. So parang malaki po yung tinatalon nung survivorship niya, which I believe would indicate na bigla-bigla pong bumababa yung survivorship niya towards the end. And then coupled with that po, yung reproductive rate na 1.32, which is essentially mas mababa po as compared sa mga prior na nabanggit ng 5 point something, 6.75. It would also indicate na parang case selected po siya, which also adds evidence to the fact na possible na type 1 siya.
Okay. Aliyah, do you agree or disagree?
Actually po, I agree po with Carlos answer po, which is type 1. Because as we can see nga po sa survivorship po niya, it is declining po. For me po, I don't know po if tama, pero I guess po parang it represents po like late age mortality since super baba na po nung survivorship niya po sa bandang huli po. Yan lang po.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So, sige. For most organisms, the adulthood is achieved when we reach peak fertility. So pag marami na tayong napoproduce na babies, we're generally considered adults. And I think in the previous discussions, we all agreed that it's about 6 to 7. So let's say 6 to 7 is adulthood. And at that point, only 33% of the cohort survive. Kung 33% na lang yung nag-survive by adulthood, is that representative of type 1, type 2, or type 3? So is 33% majority? So by adulthood, patay na yung 70%. So again, one more chance for 3 more people. If 33% are the only remaining individuals by adulthood, is this type 1, type 2, or type 3? Anybody wants to answer? Javi, go ahead.
Type 3 po ba, miss?
Dahil?
Because by adulthood po, like in the graph, it was parang yung middle stage po. Sobrang baba na po siya sa curve.
Okay. See, Kyle, do you agree or disagree with Javi?
I agree po with JV because as you said po, if the peak is 33% na lang, meaning it's less than half pa, it means that the survivorship or the population is declining over time. So it's type 3 po.
Okay. RC, agree or disagree?
I agree with both Kyle and JB because yes, there is a steep decline, of course, from birth to adulthood, wherein yes, it goes from 1 to 0.33, which is
Okay.
representative of a type 3.
Okay. So for when you're using fecundity schedules to determine the type of survivorship, you first look at the age where they have peak reproduction, and that's what you consider adulthood. And then you look at the number of individuals that survived to adulthood. If majority died to adulthood, then it's leaning towards type 3. If majority, died before adulthood, then it's leaning towards type 3. If majority survived to adulthood, then we're leaning towards type 1. If it's about half, then that's about type 2. So let's see if you can apply it to another fecundity schedule. Let's look at this one. So given this fecundity schedule, does this species represent a type 1, type 2, or type 3 survivorship curve? See, Kyle, go ahead.
So in this fecundity schedule naman po, it's type 1 since the peak po is also at 6 to 7 age class, but it's reflecting a 78% survivorship, meaning po na majority of the population is still surviving. So it means that it's in type 1 po.
Okay. John, do you agree or disagree with C. Kyle?
I agree po that this is a type 1 because as it can be observed po, yung survivorship niya po during the younger ages, like the majority of organisms survive, 0.98, 0.96. And when you reach adulthood, which is most likely going to be 6 to 7 years old because mataas po yung age specific fertility niya, most of the organisms will survive 0.78.
Okay, thank you for that. And Herschel?
Ma'am,
Yes. Go ahead,
I would
John.
also want to ask a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there an organism like this po? Because usually baga po, usually if mataas po, if type 1 po siya, usually mababa po yung rate of reproduction niya. How come does this organism have a 6.75 ano po?
Yes, there are organisms like this, like humans and elephants. We usually reproduce at maturity. Like, hindi naman tayo nagre-reproduce at 6 to 7 years old, 8 to 9 years old. Nagre-reproduce tayo during our 20s to 30s. And for these type 1 organisms, we end up having an expanding population.
Thank you.
Okay, Herschel, last one. Do you agree or disagree with John and C. Kyle?
Yes po, I agree po with their answer since what was said po earlier. In the maturity age class po, which is most likely 6 to 7 na age class, a majority po of the population survived with a survivorship value of 0.78. So, making it have a type 1, ano yun? Type 1
Survivorship curve.
survivorship curve. Yes po.
Okay, thank you. Margarita, do you have a question?
Yes, Patok, is it alright to ask for about the previous slide?
Sure.
You said po to look at yung, ang tawag dyan, yung pinakamataas na
Peak reproduction.
peak reproduction to see yung adulthood. Tapos it's 33% po survivorship. But can't you argue na it could be type 2? Kasi when you plot it, imagine na the point 33 could also be yung parang doon sa um doon sa line within type 2 na linear siya. Kasi when you look at the survivorship in general also. So you first look at the adult yung adult mga yung age ng sorry, yung age ng mga adults, right? Then you look at it as a whole also. And then you can see na it's still gradual. Na hindi naman siya yung super bagsak agad pagka adulthood. When you look at yung age 4 to 5 and also yung age yung age 5 to 6 and also yung age 7 to 8, it wasn't very mabilis. Hindi siya steep. So it's just gradual. So can't you also argue na it's type 2?
Pag type 1 kasi, yung pre-adulthood, yung steep. Yung type 2, gradual. In this case, if you argue that this is gradual, then dapat by adulthood, kalahati pa yung natitira. Pero we only have 33%. So it means you lost 70% during this early part before you reach the middle portion. So, like from 100 to 33% is a huge drop. So, ang hirap i-argue na type 2 siya kasi siguro kung 40% yung natira, pwede pa, pero 33% by the time you're reproducing, 70% is a lot. So all of this is happening pre-adulthood, and a drop from 100 to 33, I don't think you can consider that gradual, Margarita.
So Miss, yung what that means po is dapat mostly about 50-40 ganung klaseng drop lang dapat.
Yeah, between 0 to the reproductive age.
Okay po. Thank you.
Okay. Sige, last one for this kind of question. Let's say this is your fecundity schedule. What survivorship curve fits this organism? Okay, MC, go ahead.
Hello, Miss. My answer is type 2 po since they're consistent. Yung differences from age classes po until sa older po siya. Like hindi naman po super layo yung differences or yung gaps nila. Parang precise po sila to each other. So I consider this is a type 2 kind of ano po survivor. Ay, ano tawag doon?
Survivorship curve.
Survivorship curve po.
Okay. Ria, do you agree or disagree?
Miss, my answer would be
after the peak po kasi, 'di ba po, 0.825, the the survivorship became 0.26 po.
Mhm.
So my answer would also be type 2 because as you can see po, there is a stable survivorship across all ages. So I would agree with type 2 po.
Okay. Jane, do you agree or disagree?
I disagree po because before adulthood is reached, we joke. I agree po with the answers po.
Okay. Margarita, do you agree or disagree?
I disagree po, Doc. I
Mhm.
think it was just mentioned kanina na when you look at the peak, it's 0.8 reproductive rate. And then 0.33, so malaki yung bagsak niya sa survivorship. So that means na a lot was lost. So, sorry, type 1 pala, type 1 kasi a lot was lost during adulthood. Ay, type 3, sorry, yung type 3, sorry, type 3 pala yung sa mga insects. Ano ba yun? Naguluhan na ako. Yung sa insects, sorry, yeah, yung insects. Sure ako, yung sa mga insects, sa invertebrates, type 3 kasi malaki na yung bagsak niya by then.
Okay. Aliyah, you still have your hand up?
Actually, I was gonna answer po. Like, I agree po with Margarita's answer po. Like, as you said po kanina, we should look at first kung saan po yung pinakamataas na reproductive rate, which is yung 0.825, which yung survivorship niya po is 0.33, meaning po, halos 70% na po ng population yung namatay. So, I guess it's type 3 din po.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So, ang try niyong i-imagine dito is parang kunyari may string ka, yun yung graph. And ang midpoint mo dapat, yung gitna, would be the peak reproduction. So in this case, it's 5 to 6 kasi 0.825. And then, kung ang straight line, kunyari nag-start sila sa 100, tas ang gitna is 5 to 6, 0.33 means from 100%, 33% na lang yung nabuhay. Is that halfway? Is that above halfway or lower than halfway? And as you can see in this case, 0.33 0.33 na lang yung buhay by the time they're actively reproducing. So ang laki nung drop nun compared to the pre-reproductive ages. So this is leaning towards type 3. I know it's confusing to type 2 kasi hindi ganun ka-drastic. Pero again, ang titingnan nyo lagi, peak reproductive, ganun na lang kakonte yung nagsusurvive. If sobrang konti na lang yung nagsusurvive by the highest contribution to fecundity, then it's leaning towards type 3. Ang type 2, kasi nga consistent siya, dapat halfway pa lang, kalahati pa lang yung namamatay by the time na nagpi-peak reproduction. Pag type 1, pag nag-peak reproduction at marami pa rin sila, more than half, then that's type 1. So medyo pinasok ko lang to kasi feeling ko ina-expect nyo magpapakita ko ng type 2. So, binalik ko lang sa type 3. RC, go ahead.
My question lang po is, which do we use to determine peak reproduction? Is it is it a maximum of MX or a maximum of LXMX?
LXMX.
Thank you po.
Sure. Margarita, go ahead.
Miss, what if yung peak reproductive rate, hindi po siya exactly sa gitna? So, kunwari, di ba, in this case, nasa age 5 to 6 siya. What if yung peak reproductive rate niya nasa bandang age 8 to 9? So, hindi siya gitna nung curve, di ba?
Siya pa rin yung i-consider mong gitna. Kasi ibig sabihin, mahaba yung juvenile stage ng organism.
Okay po. Thank you po.
Yeah, so you always consider peak reproductive age as the middle. Kasi siya, ibig sabihin, prior to that, immature sila. I mean, non-reproductive sila, juvenile pa sila, yon. I do not claim to know the emotional maturity of animals. Margarita, go ahead.
Sorry, ito ang dami question. But what if hindi po given yung age-specific fertility? Kunwari, survivorship lang as is, how will you determine po kung
I
anong
don't
type of
think you could. It would be hard. Well, not unless it's stated in the question, like assume that maturity is reached at this age. So it's hard to know. Kasi for most organisms, maturity is determined by the ability to reproduce.
Okay po, thank you.
Sure. Okay, last na for today. So we have about 7 or 8 minutes left before your quiz starts. Population growth patterns. So this describe how the size of a population changes over time due to factors like birth rates, death rates, immigration, and environmental constraints. So there are two primary population growth models. The first of which would be density dependent population growth, which depends on population size, and then density independent populations, which affect population regardless of size. So if you look at the patterns shown here, you have an exponential growth curve, which is shaped like a letter J. This is when a population increases rapidly and indefinitely under ideal conditions. So meaning, unlimited ang resources, walang competition, walang predation. So yun yung letter A. So for these kinds of population growth, growth starts slow but accelerates as population size increases. So this is common in species with high reproductive rates and abundant resources, katulad ng bacteria o kaya invasive species. So for the most part, this kind of population growth pattern is not sustainable because eventually resources become limited, so it can lead to a crash. Now, on the other hand, you have the red curve, the B curve, which is called the logistic curve. It's shaped like a letter S. It's population growth that slows down as it reaches a maximum sustainable size, which is dependent on the carrying capacity or K of the ecosystem. So for these kinds of populations, initial growth is exponential, but it slows as resources become limited. And therefore, it plateaus or flattens at carrying capacity when birth rate would become equivalent to death rate. So this is more realistic for species that are attuned to their environment. So for example, if you look at deer populations in a forest, it eventually stabilizes due to food limitations. But of course, things actually end up being a little bit more complicated than that. We have here Grimes' model of life history, which is an ecological framework that classifies plant strategies based on how they adapt to different environmental conditions. So this model was initially presented in 1977, and up to now, it's still being used to look at how different organisms survive when there are different types of organisms in the environment. So it has three main environmental factors: S, which is stress, D, which is disturbance, and C, which is competition. So you have competitive strategies, which are your C strategists, your competitors. They thrive in environments with low stress and low disturbance, but high competition. So they grow rapidly, they invest in resource acquisition, and they dominate stable habitats. So examples of this would be trees like oak and beech, shrubs and tall grasses. And then you have your stress tolerant strategy, or for your S strategists. You find them in environments with high stress, so extreme temperatures, nutrient poor soils, but low disturbance, walang ibang organism. So they grow slowly, they have long lifespans, and they allocate resources to survival rather than rapid growth. So examples of these would be cacti in deserts, so cactus, lichens on rocks, and alpine plants, yung nasa peak ng mountains. And then you have your R strategists or your ruderals. So they thrive in environments with high disturbance, maraming nagbabago-bago, but low stress. So they grow quickly, they reproduce early, and rely on seed dispersal to colonize new areas after disturbances. So these are your weeds, your annual plants like dandelions, and pioneer species in abandoned fields. So beyond these three primary groups of organisms, you also have your intermediate strategists. So you have your CS, or competitive stress tolerant strategy. So these are plants in environments with moderate competition and stress but low disturbance. So they're adapted to resource limited yet stable conditions. So they tend to be slow growing and long lived, balancing efficiency in resource use with survival in stress conditions. You have your competitive ruderal strategy, which are found in habitats with moderate competition and disturbance, but low stress. So they grow quickly like ruderals, but also invest in competition to dominate a habitat. So they're frequently found in moderately disturbed ecosystems like grasslands and early successional forests. Then you have your SR strategists. These occur in harsh but frequently disturbed environments. They're adapted to surviving difficult conditions and recovering quickly from disturbances. They're usually small, slow-growing plants with high tolerance to extreme conditions. And finally, you have your CSR, or generalist strategy, which thrive in moderate levels of competition, stress, and disturbance. So these are plants with a mix of all three traits, making them flexible in different environments. So they can survive in moderate stress, compete pag kailangan, and recolonize after disturbances. So these are some of the models in trying to see how the ecosystem can affect the survival or success of different organisms. We have about a minute before the quiz. So for those of you who need to transfer to somewhere with faster speed, now would be the best time to do it. If you have questions, we have 1 minute before your quiz opens. Margarita, go ahead.
Doc, fast question lang po. I got a bit confused with the difference of disturbance and stress. Could you elaborate on it po? Thank you.
Disturbance is sudden but extreme. Stress is continuous. So stress is, kunwari, nakatira ka sa volcano, so laging mainit. Disturbance is biglang nagkasunog. Does that help?
Yes po, thank you.
Okay. So yan, good luck everybody with your first quiz on population ecology. I will see you again on Thursday. You don't have to stay in the Zoom while taking the quiz. Good luck.